Hello, this is Britt Kessel with another example video. In today's video, I'm covering example 4 from section 9-4 in the SavvasRealize Algebra 1 textbook. The goal of today's video is to determine a reasonable solution. So we're trying some real-world problems. So a cell phone tower has a guy wire for support as shown. Okay, so sometimes like wind blows cell phone towers, so sometimes they attach wires to the ground to help hold it up. It says the height of the tower and the distance from the tower to where the guy wire is secured on the ground are the same distance. So they're saying from here to here is x and from here to here is x. What is the height of the tower? And then here it says that the guy wire is 200 feet long. All right. So, I see a right triangle here. And anytime you see a right triangle, you should always think of my dude, Pythagoras. Love that man. So what Pythagoras said was he had a theorem. He said that if you have a right triangle with legs A and B and hypotenuse C, then A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Pythagorean's theorem on this problem. So my legs A and B are each x, so I'm going to replace them with x's. And then C is my hypotenuse, which is the guy wire, which is 200 feet. All right, so now our goal is to solve for x, right? We want to get x alone. So the first thing I'm going to do is combine my like terms. So I have 2x squared equals, and then 200 squared, so 200 times itself is 40,000. All right, so now my goal is to get the x alone. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by 2 to get rid of that 2. So I have x squared equals 20,000. And then to counteract the square, I need to take the square root. Now remember, anytime you take a square root, you need to put a plus or minus, or else you're wrong, because you're eliminating one of your answers. So I get that x equals the positive or negative, and I need to break apart this 20,000. Now, when I have a bunch of zeros here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break it into a bunch of tens. So because there's 4 zeros, I put 4 tens, and those are going to act as my pairs that I pull out of my radical. So this is going to turn into x equals the positive or negative. I have 10 times 10, which is 100, root 2. Now let's think about what this is describing, okay? This is the distance or a height above the ground, right? So does it make sense to have a negative height? It doesn't, right? So I'm only going to use the positive value because I can't have negative distances. And it's all based off the context of the problem. So I know I'm not going to deal with the negative, but I also, if I'm answering somebody's question, 100 root 2 doesn't quite answer it. So I'm going to find an approximation. So if I take 100 and multiply it times the square root of 2, I get about 141. Now because this is a word problem, I'm going to give it a word solution. So the height of the tower is approximately 141 feet. Alrighty. So now we're dealing with another one where they give us this z feet. This one I think is kind of interesting. Okay, so we already found that these distances are about 141, right? And if the guy wire is 200 feet long, this thing here is cutting this in half. So this part is 100 and this part is 100. So I'm dealing with a right triangle now. I'm going to try to draw a new right triangle. It has a hypotenuse of 141. It has a leg of 100, and then it has another height of z, and I don't know what that is. So I'm going back to using Pythagoras to help me to solve that out. Now when I do this 141, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to undo it being 141, and I'm going to call it by its exact solution. Because if I use 141, what I'm doing is I'm actually using an approximation, which is going to make my value for z also an approximation. And we don't want that. Alright, so I have called it again 100 root 2. So if I use Pythagoras' theorem, I have that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. Alright, and so now we're just going to kind of simplify that out. So 100 squared is 10,000. And then here I have, remember back here in my problem, I got the 100 root 2 from taking the square root of 20,000, right? So if taking the square root of 20,000 got me to 100 root 2, squaring 100 root 2 will give me 20,000. Now I could also square each of these. I'd get 10,000 times 2, which is 20,000. Alright, so now to go for z squared, the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 10,000 from each side. So I get z squared equals 10,000. And then I'm going to take the square root of each side. And remember, if ever you take a square root, you need to put a plus or minus, or else you're eliminating a potential answer. So I have z equals the positive or negative. 10,000 is like 100 times 100, right? That's how we got it up over here. Now remember, this is a physical distance, right? So when I have a physical distance, I can't have that negative on there. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm only taking into account the positive value. So the distance from the base of the tower to the midpoint of the guy wire is 100 feet. So there we have it, guys. That is how to determine a reasonable solution. Until next time.